let's get going.
And people can jump on as they show up. So I'd like to thank everybody for signing up for this discussion, which is really the kickoff event for a new company we're starting called Street Smart Entrepreneurs. And it really takes advantage of the last 45 to 50 years of my life where I've been involved in various entrepreneurial efforts. I'm really passionate about working with entrepreneurs. So this vehicle is going to provide the platform to do that. And through Street Smart Entrepreneurs, we hope to be providing strategic direction, information, and resources for other entrepreneurs and owners of small, mid-sized businesses worldwide. So this is a very important event for us, and I certainly appreciate your support and involvement. You're running the slides, Timur?
You are, Jack.
Didn't run. It's not changing.
Okay. All right, can you try now?
Okay. Did you do that or did I?
That was you.
Okay, great. Two of us are going to be leading this discussion. I think a lot of you know who I am. And as I said, I've been doing entrepreneurial things for over 45 years. And Timur, who's co-hosting this event, is an advisor and director of content development for this new venture. And Timur, both of us will be talking a little bit more about our backgrounds as we go through the slide deck. We also have other advisors to Street Smart on this call. Mitch Beinhacker is a good friend of mine. I've known him a long time. He's an entrepreneurial lawyer and a podcaster based in New Jersey. My son, Jonathan Killian, is really one of the top turnaround restructuring experts in the country. He's a managing director, has a CFA designation, and he's with a firm in New York called Karl Marx. And then Richard Shapiro, also a good longtime friend. Richard is one of the country's top customer service experts. He's authored a couple of books on the topic, and he's a founder of his own company maybe 25 years ago called the Center for Client Retention. And then I expect to be adding one or two other advisors as we go through the balance of this year. So we're putting together a quality team of people who really understand the entrepreneurial market and have real expertise to bring to the table. And our target audience is, we're targeting a global audience. This isn't just a New Jersey or a American focus. We want to work with entrepreneurs worldwide. We want to work with first-time and experienced entrepreneurs. We want to work with people who are owners of their own small, mid-sized companies. We want to work with entrepreneurs who are leading organizations, a lot of them major organizations, but leading them in a very entrepreneurial way. And then we want to be working with professional advisors to the same people that we're trying to service. So my view of entrepreneurship is anybody who's in a leading position in any kind of an organization, whether it's a school, a university, a hospital, a church. I think every leader needs to be thinking and acting in an entrepreneurial way. And I hope that we can touch those people in some way with some of the services and content that we're going to be developing. Our goal today really is simply to get you thinking about your own entrepreneurial future. So, this is an exercise really to raise a lot of questions in your mind and get you thinking about where you are, where you want to be, where you might go, and either being an entrepreneur or working with entrepreneurs. And hopefully today is the start of beginning to develop a working relationship between our group and you, and developing a real friendship based on our ability to accomplish good things together. Reasons why we decided to start our new venture with this discussion. I think COVID-19 is going to spur a real growth in entrepreneurship and in entrepreneurship. I mean, millions of people have lost their jobs. They're not going to be, it's not going to be so easy for them finding new jobs. So a lot of them are going to have to decide to jump off the ledge and become entrepreneurs and start new businesses. And we want to help them do that. There's going to be lots of new opportunities being created in our economy. Our healthcare system is going to get better and changed. Our education system is going to change and get better. I think corporate America is going to change. It's going to get to be more nimble, more flexible, lower cost, more competitive. People's work-life balances are going to get better because a lot of them are not going to be happy going back to working 5 days a week and spending 4 hours a day commuting. And finally, technology that we have facilitates the lean and nimble startups that are going to be possible and that are going to be coming out of this COVID-19 situation. But unfortunately, the majority of new ventures that start are not going to make it. So we want to do our little part in trying to help new ventures be successful. Just some survival data from the U.S. Department of Labor statistics. 20% of all new ventures fail in the first year. 65% fail within 10 years, which means that over 70% of all entrepreneurs fail with their next new venture. And there isn't really much difference in the success rate of first-time entrepreneurs. 18% of their next ventures will make it, whereas people who have previously started a company that was successful, they only have a 30% success rate with their next new venture. So we think that there's a real need for quality information, quality guidance that can change these numbers and tilt the landscape in favor of entrepreneurs starting and trying to grow new ventures. So a little bit about my background. From an entrepreneurial point of view, I've been there and I've done that. In fact, that's the title of the book that I'm just about finished writing that summarizes all my entrepreneurial experiences and the lessons I've learned from all the things I've done. As I said, I quit my last salary job with McKinsey over 45 years ago. And since then, I've started and successfully grown 9 different diverse companies. Street Smart Entrepreneurs is the 10th startup that I've been involved in. But in that 45-year period, I've also been constantly asked to evaluate thousands of deals, and I've advised maybe hundreds of entrepreneurs. In fact, as of 10 o'clock last night, I got an email from a guy I know asking for some help on a new business idea that he's planning to launch. On the surface of it, I don't think it's a very good idea, but as recently as 14 hours ago, I was being asked to evaluate a potential new business idea. I've served on multiple boards and I've taught in 3 university business schools, mostly about entrepreneurial studies. So, I've got a real background in entrepreneurship as part of my DNA. Just to be a little bit more specific, the very first company I started when I left McKinsey turned out to be a 3-person partnership called KBO. And we focused on raising venture capital for startup and early stage companies and consulting with investors in deals that were either struggling or plateauing. And I spent 5 years in that partnership. And that's one of the first places that I really started to get good at networking and building relationships, because I had to do that. And it's also where I really start to look at, business models in a very analytical way. And I concluded that our business model was really a lousy one. So we left KBO and we morphed into raising money and starting America's first country music magazine. And I stayed with that project for 5 years before selling my interest back to my 2 partners because I had to take over Killian Extruders, which was a company my dad had started. And when he passed away on a Saturday morning, I had not been involved in the business. I went to his office and I found that the company had $23 in the bank and owed over $2 million, most of it guaranteed. So I recognized that with no successor in place, I had to start working there that Sunday. And I wound up running that company for a total of 15 years. but always while I was doing other things. One of the people I worked with at Killing Extruders, I teamed up with him and a guy in Florida. We started a real estate development firm in Florida, where I spent 5 years. The three of us spent 5 years doing that. My wife and I bought a 50-acre farm in New Jersey and spent 20 years breeding, developing, and training racehorses. That was certainly a very entrepreneurial effort. I learned a lot of things doing that that apply to any business leader. Along the way, I teamed up with an ex-McKinsey guy. We started the first magazine in the wireless and mobile communication space. I spent 7 years with that project before we sold the publication. And that's one of the places where I really learned the importance of timing in launching new businesses. I then went on to start a niche sector-specific hedge fund called the Information and Communication Technology Fund. That was a partnership with a person from Wall Street. That was the first place where I had picked the wrong partner to be in business with. So that venture only lasted 3 years, although the fund continued. I got out and I started a fund of hedge funds, which I ran up until the end of 2018. So I ran that for a total of 18 years, and I only ended it because at the time I had some health issues. And then finally, the ninth new venture, for the last 5 years, I've been coaching people on how to develop their networking and relationship building skills. And I've been consulting with a couple of very select early stage ventures. So, in 45 plus years, I've really been there and I've done that. Timur, why don't you explain a little bit more about your background?
Thanks, Jack. So I come into this venture knowing Jack for close to 5 years. And we were actually worked together while I was the executive director of the Rothman Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Fairleigh Dickinson University. So I have close to 15 years of work experience in the higher education field. I'm very proud of what I accomplished at Fairleigh Dickinson. Worked very closely with veteran-owned startups and small businesses, as well as family-owned businesses. I grew training programs for those two audiences. I also, helped startups and founders with their business plans. And so I'm right now, very passionate about helping entrepreneurs and small businesses weather the storm. And, I feel that, they're being devastated by, the current climate, and they need additional help to make it through the next few years, since the economy is so turbulent and volatile. So prior to Fairleigh Dickinson University, I worked in international education. I oversaw a business school that was based in Paris. I ran the operations in New York. So I worked with a lot of French-owned businesses and business students. I speak fluent French and Turkish. I'm very well traveled. I loved, as part of this project, we really want to support entrepreneurial ecosystems beyond the U.S., overseas. So I'm very excited about partnering with Jack, and I've been very instrumental in not only working with entrepreneurs but doing a lot of educational programming. So I'm going to be helping Jack develop new courses for the entrepreneurial audience. I also have experience setting up pitch competitions, as well as large scale events, working with a diverse array of audiences in the educational space. I'm also really excited to work with Jack on developing future events, summits, conferences for business owners. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm working with Jack on developing content and publishing new courses. So stay tuned, and I'm going to pass it back over to Jack.
Thanks, Timur. Obviously Timur's got a great international business background that we can all tap into. Certainly I can. So, the purpose of today was to get you thinking about where do you stand in this entrepreneurial environment. And we came up with 8 factors that we think you need to be paying attention to. Do you have the right personal characteristics to succeed in this entrepreneurial space? If you're starting a new business, do you have a good business idea and a valid business model? I've seen people try to start businesses with good ideas, but they had a flawed business model to support the idea. Do you have the ability to fund the launch and early stage development of your company? Have you really identified your target audience or audiences? And do you know how to go about reaching those audiences? What's your competitive edge? Do you have one? Is it important? Is the timing right for a new venture? Or is the time come and gone and you're too late? Or are you too early, like we might have been with Wireless for the Corporate User magazine? Do you have the ability to put together the right winning team of advisors, full-time and part-time people? And finally, even though you may be just in the very early stages of starting and launching a business, do you have a transition strategy that you're working on for what happens at the end of your time with the business? It's never too early to be thinking about your exit plans. So we're gonna, at the end of this session, we're gonna send everybody who's on a copy of these slides. And when you get our slide deck, you ought to look at these next two slides and score yourself in terms of the right personal characteristics that we think it's important you have. You know, you could score yourself down at the low end of 1, which means you don't really have this characteristic in your mind, or as you can give yourself as high as a 5, which means you think you have this characteristic without question. So, for example, do you have the determination and ability to ride the roller coaster that you're certainly going to ride as the owner of your own new business? You know, it takes a lot of determination to succeed as an entrepreneur. I have the Jack rule, and that is that anything worth doing will take you a year to really get going. So even though you may have a good idea, it's going to take you at least a year to demonstrate to yourself and to others that it's a viable idea. Do you have the sufficient energy to get up and go at your new idea 7 days a week for the next 365 days a year? Are you in good health? You can't afford to be taking time off if you have health issues while you're in the process of starting and growing a new company. And is your lifestyle compatible with the kind of energy and hours that you're going to have to put in to starting and growing a new business? This third point is really important. Do you have the support at home from your spouse or significant other and or your family? Are they behind your efforts to be an entrepreneur? I've had partnerships that I was involved in that went belly up because my partner's spouse didn't agree with what he was doing. You know, just didn't see the value or the need or the payoff from making the effort that was required. So you have to have support at home. Yeah, this fourth point is my personal thing. I mean, you better be a great networker and a great developer of important relationships, because your ability to network is going to be equally or far more important than any amount of money you invest in your project. You got to be great at meeting people, making things happen, and developing really win-win relationships. Do you have the courage and perseverance to stick to an idea? Or are you going to get discouraged? Or are you going to get fearful? You can't be afraid of starting and growing your own company. And then the last point on this slide, are you passionate? Are you particularly passionate about selling, problem solving, and leading other people? You know, I think anybody who runs a company, whether they like it or not, whether they agree with it or not, they have to be really excellent at selling. They have to be the front face of the company. And I've seen a lot of new ventures struggle or not make it because the top person, whether a male or female, just wasn't comfortable selling. My wife started a magazine called Garden State Woman many years ago. And one of the real weaknesses in that venture, which was a venture with a need and a very good business model, is Judy just didn't like being out selling. And, you know, she wanted me to help sell, but I thought it was disingenuous for some guy to be selling a women's magazine. So, you know, I've seen that problem firsthand in my own family. And then a few other things. Are you really creative? You know, can you think outside the box, and do you have the ability to spot opportunities? Most people haven't trained themselves to see new opportunities. Over the last 45 years, I've gotten to be pretty good at it. So I might see a billboard or hear a conversation on television or read a magazine article, and it will immediately trigger me to see an opportunity in whatever I've just come across. And as an entrepreneur, it's really critical that you be able to leverage ideas and opportunities instead of having to spend money. I think ideas and creativity and opportunities are a great way to leverage your own efforts. And are you flexible? Because no business model is going to stand up over the next X years. You're going to have to pivot on a dime with your business model, with your strategies, maybe with some of your people, maybe with your products and services. And are you a great listener and a great learner? I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs struggle because they're lousy listeners. They tend to talk over people. They're not open to new ideas. They think they're the expert. And the older I get, and I'm pretty old, I'm the oldest one on this call, I'm certainly not an expert. And I can learn every day from everybody I ever meet. And, you know, then are you a database problem solver? Or do you just wing it when it comes time to making decisions, which I don't recommend? And finally, are you really excellent at multitasking and making decisions? Can you pull the trigger? I think we have at least one person on this call who works with a company where she thinks the leadership has trouble making decisions, and they over agonize and overthink things. So, you know, score yourself on these characteristics in the way we sort of interpret them. If you get a score of 50 or higher, we think you've got pretty high entrepreneurial aptitude. If you're in the 42 to 50 range, you generally have strong characteristics. You probably want to improve in a few of them. If you're in the 33 to 41 range, we think you definitely need strengthening in several of the areas. And if you're under 32 in your own personal rating, then we think you're lacking many vital characteristics that may not prevent you from being a successful entrepreneur, but they're certainly going to make it tougher on you. So this is, I think, a very interesting exercise for you to go through.
Yeah, Jack,
Yeah,
if I can just add to that,
sure.
heavily emphasize the data skills. Currently, I forgot to mention that I work at Columbia University's School of Engineering. I oversee executive education, professional ed programs, and I think if you're not analytical, if you don't have any data analytical skills, you should have someone on your team that is your partner. I also think take some courses in data analytics. Do your research. Look at maybe if you have access to academic journals or publications at your local library on market research, consumer behavior. How are consumers behaving in this kind of scary climate? Do your homework and bring that into the mix.
It's great, Timur. All important points. You know, you can't just wing it. The world is moving so fast and it's so complicated, so complex that you got to really be basing your key decisions on good understanding of the facts. So let's get into the 8 factors. First of all, do you have a good new business idea? And how do you know it's a good business idea? What kind of research, like Timur's just been talking about, have you done? What are your assumptions? When we started Country Music Magazine, we went around with a prototype of the magazine to all the record companies, showing them what we intended to do and asking them, how willing they were going to be to support us with their advertising dollars. And without an exception, they all thought it was a great idea. There was no national country music magazine. They thought there was a need for a high quality publication in the space. They all said they would advertise with us. So our assumption was that we could get record company advertising. When we came out with the first issue and we went back to them to get advertising going forward, we had a really tough time selling advertising to the record companies. Their story totally changed. They said, you know, they don't sell records by print advertising. They sell records by getting them played on the radio stations. So our assumption that we used to go out and raise the money to start the magazine was that record companies would support us, and that assumption turned out to be wrong. So we had to change our business model immediately. So what major problem does your business idea solve, and for whom? Like, we thought we were solving a major marketing problem for record companies, that they had no universal national way to reach the marketplace. Turns out they didn't think that was a critical problem. And how are you going to protect your intellectual property? If you have a good idea, what's going to stop other people from ripping you off? Is there a demand for your product or service? Will people pay for it? How much? We have somebody on the call today, Stu Brown, who asked me the other day when I told him about what I was planning to do. Why? What's the justification for your business model? You know, how do you know there's going to be a demand? What gives you a competitive edge? So Stu got me thinking about it. And I think what gives me a competitive edge in doing this is the last 45 years, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year that I've spent in the trenches doing entrepreneurial things. There aren't very many people who have that depth of background. And finally, is your new business idea sustainable? Or is it going to be a fad, a short-term thing? So I've seen a lot of new business ideas that seem good, but unfortunately, too many of them are not really good. In the 5 years that the three of us spent with KBO looking at new ventures proposed by other people, we really only saw maybe less than a dozen ideas that were really great. And we only got involved in a couple of new ventures by supporting them to raise money and helping to grow them. And the most noteworthy of those deals was Rolling Stone magazine, that we helped Jan Winter get off the ground. So out of 1,000 deals, there might be 10 of them that are really, really special, that have a shot at major success. So can you tweak your business model to make it even better? Maybe you've got a good business idea, but the business model that supports it isn't quite right. Are you thinking about ways to tweak the business model? I recently gave up an advisory role with a software development company that I thought had a basically good idea as a new business. They had been working on it for over 5 years, but I finally decided that the business model was flawed and it wasn't going to really lead to major success. So after 5 years of investing my time, I turned and walked away. What's the competitive edge of your new business, and how long can you sustain that competitive edge? Do the economics of your business make sense? I've seen a lot of new businesses start, without really realizing how tight the margins are going to be, and there's no wiggle room for mistakes or problems. And finally, is the business model scalable, or are you always going to be heading a tiny, narrowly focused, geographically narrowly focused business where you can't really scale it and turn it into a viable thing that you could monetize down the road? If you went on Shark Tank with your business idea tonight, how do you think you would do facing the judges? I think that program was terrific, and I think it's a real litmus test for people who are pretty confident about having a good new business idea. And the vast majority of entrepreneurs who go on that reality TV show, get shot down. So let's move on. Can you fund your new business idea? Do you have the ability to bootstrap it? Or are you going to have to go out and raise money to start and or grow your business?
Jack?
Yeah, go ahead, Timur.
Can you explain bootstrapping to everyone?
Yeah, it means basically, in my mind, substituting hours and energy and ideas and relationships for money. It's trying to minimize the amount of money that you have to invest in getting something going. Maybe it means keeping your day job and working nights and weekends on getting your new venture going so that you can support yourself in the process. And, you know, I bootstrap most of the new ventures that I've started. You know, I raised $500,000 to start Country Music Magazine. I've raised up to millions of dollars for client organizations. I raised many millions of dollars for my fund of hedge funds. But I've also bootstrapped a lot of things and started with no cash and mostly ideas, relationships, and ideas, and a lot of energy. And if you do have to uh, get some money to start your business, are you prepared to personally fund the business? Are you willing to dip into your bank account and take out savings? Or are you prepared to take out a mortgage on your home? And a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, are reluctant to do that. And they would prefer to go out and try to raise outside funding. Well, if I'm an outside investor, one of the things I want to know is how much personal skin in the game does the entrepreneur have? And if the entrepreneur's not on the hook personally, financially, I'm not very interested in investing in his or her own company. How much money do you need to get your venture to the cash flow positive point? I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't really know the answer to that question. And a lot of entrepreneurs I've worked with are not really comfortable looking at the financial aspects of their business idea. And finally, if you have to raise the funding from outside, have you ever done that? Do you have any experience? Do you know how to do that? Or would you need help in raising funding? And who are you going to turn to get help? And how much would you have to pay to get somebody to help you do that? And what do you expect to pay or give up for funding? If you go out and sell equity in your company, what portion of the equity do you think is fair to give up for the money that you need? I've seen entrepreneurs go for years trying to raise the money they need, but failing because they overvalue their venture. You know, it's very easy for entrepreneurs to overvalue what they're trying to create, and you got to be realistic. So when I try to raise money for my own ventures or for other people's ventures, I try to put myself on both sides of the equation. What am I trying to raise and what do I think is fair? And if I was an investor, what would I want to get for the amount of money that the entrepreneur is asking me to provide? So it's got to be a win-win situation when it comes time to raising funding. And do you have any creative ideas for raising money? I think most entrepreneurs think about either borrowing some money or selling equity. And I guarantee there are a lot of other ways to raise funding for new ventures. I developed a couple of years ago a course on how to raise funding for startup and early stage companies that's on Udemy, and it's gotten very good reviews. And I emphasized in that course all the different creative ways that I've helped people raise money for their new ventures. And do you understand the legal do's and don'ts when it comes time to raising money for the company you're trying to start and get going? You can't just arbitrarily go out in the street trying to raise money. There are guidelines that the government has provided to investors that prevent you from scamming them and taking advantage of them. So my conclusion is that creative funding is often the answer to getting the money you need to start and grow a company. So why don't we take a quick break here, Timur? Why don't you see if we have any questions or comments from the group?
Yes, Jack. Great. We have a question comment from Chris Taylor. Is it better to focus on making meaning rather than just making money? In other words, should you ask yourself how your idea will change the world for the better rather than how much will I make?
Anybody have any comments on that? I never really start out a business looking at how much am I going to make doing it. I generally start businesses because I'm passionate about the idea at the time, and I think I can really make a difference in that business. Like when I went into the horse racing business, even though I was going in at the very grassroots level by owning one horse, I recognized that the industry had problems. And I thought if I put in enough effort and managed to build a brand within that industry, that I might be able to get into a position where I could have an impact on the racing industry. And that turned out to be the case. When we started Country Music Magazine, we wanted to do a really good job of raising the visibility of the whole country music industry. We wanted to really try to push it front and center in the music field. When I ran Killian Extruders, I wanted to make a real difference in the area of polymer processing. So I think when you start something, you better be passionate about it. And I think you should have a goal much bigger than how much money do you make.
Any other questions from?
Yeah, Mitch has got a question. Can you unmute Mitch? Timur?
Yes.
Did that work?
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, Mitch.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to what you just said, Jack. I think that just to give my 2 cents a little bit, I think that, obviously entrepreneurism and small business and all the things that we do is driven by money, right? We want to make money, and that's why we do it. Even social entrepreneurship, you want to make money to support your cause and so forth. But I think that being an entrepreneur and running your own business and all the things that you mentioned in your slides so far is so difficult for people to succeed, that if you're not passionate about what you do and only focused on your ability to make money, you're just going to have a real tough time of it. And you really got to be passionate about what you do, believe in what you do. It has a purpose, because there's going to be times where it gets so difficult that you're going to be like, why am I doing this? If that's the only thing that's driving you. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in, add my 2 cents about it.
No, that's great, Mitch. It's certainly true. That was one of the personal characteristics to really have the determination and the courage to keep going when things get tough. And I think you need to have an underlying bigger purpose where you can really impact people and impact the world.
Right. I agree.
Anybody else, Timur?
I think we can go.
Okay, we can come back to questions and comments at the end of the session as well. So let's switch gears. We talked about your personal characteristics. We talked about raising money. Well, let's talk a little bit about, who are you targeting and how do you reach your target audience? I think you have to be very specific about the audience you're going after. For example, when I took over Extruders, I don't think the company really had a focus on the target market. And after I was there a few months, I decided we were going to go after 3 different audiences: Fortune 500 research and development labs that needed small scale equipment like we were developing, medical tubing suppliers that also needed small equipment like we were developing, and finally the international audience that needed similar types of equipment as those 2 other niche audiences. So, I defined the audiences that we're going to go after. And it turned out, those were large enough to make the effort worthwhile. So you need to be looking at how big is your target audience, and then how do you cost effectively market to reach the audiences that you want to go after. I think too many entrepreneurs are weak in the marketing area. So one of the first courses that we're thinking about developing is a how to develop a creative marketing program with a high ROI that will help entrepreneurs grow their businesses. And then what sales channels can you use to work through to sell your product or services? And what are the pros and cons of each? And what are the economies of each? We've got somebody on this call this morning who's developed a new pet food product, and he's got multiple ways of bringing that product to market. Each of those channels have different pros and cons, and each of those channels will result in a different level of margin for him to work with. So you really need to understand marketing, and you really need to understand sales channels for whatever you're selling. What's your competitive edge? Why should or why will customers buy from you? What's necessarily compelling about what you're offering? I think what's compelling about what Street Smart Entrepreneurs is offering is that this our coaching and our teaching is not going to come from textbooks. It's going to come from having been there and done that. Everything that we're going to be able to share with our audience is going to be based on real life experiences, both good and bad experiences. And do you know who you're competing against? In a lot of cases, you may be competing against people who simply decide to do nothing. So you're competing against inertia, or you may be competing against somebody overseas or some niche competitor. So, do you really understand the competitive landscape? And as Timur emphasized before, have you done your homework, done your research? And what are your real competitive strengths and weaknesses? Have you done a SWOT analysis on your new business venture? Do you know what your strengths and weaknesses are? And are you being honest about them? Is your competitive edge significant and sustainable? Or is it likely to erode over either the short term or the long term? So you better have a clear understanding of where you stand competitively with your new venture idea. Can you attract the support and the team that you need to be successful? You could have a good idea, a good business model, well funded, and you put together a team that just isn't up to the task. And I emphasized very early on that you have to have your support has to start at home for your entrepreneurial efforts. But then can you put together the right partnerships? If you need partners to launch a new business, can you identify the right people? And can you put together the right arrangement? I probably have been in 5 or 6 partnerships over the last 45 years. 3 of them were really outstanding successes because I did a great job of picking the people, or we did a great job picking each other. It's not just me. And we did a great job of coming up with a basis for working together. And 2 of those 3 partnerships were based simply on a handshake. We never actually put anything in writing. And one of them ran 15 years and one of them ran about 12 years. And can you put together the right strategic alliances? It's very tough in this day and age to start and grow a business by yourself and with your own internal team. You have to leverage those resources by putting together alliances with outside firms that can do complementary things. I mentioned I just recently withdrew from a software company. One of the things that they had really done well is to create an alliance with a superb strategic partner that brought a lot to the business purpose that they were trying to accomplish. So you have to be thinking about strategic alliances for your new venture. And then can you attract and retain the right talent? You're starting out without a lot of big pot of money, so you can't use money to recruit people necessarily. So how are you going to attract, motivate, and retain the right talent? And if you don't have the right talent, you're essentially stuck from the beginning. Putting together a winning team and building the winning culture is critical. And have you worked successfully with the team before that you're assembling to drive your new business? If you're going to be out trying to raise money, either early stage or subsequent rounds of money for your company, one of the things the investors are going to look at is have you and your team ever worked well together in the past? Do you have a track record of pulling off things successfully? And is the timing of your new venture right? Why? What makes it right? I mentioned that wireless for the corporate user was years too early in the launch. We were able to make the thing successful and grow it, but it was a painful process early on because we were way ahead of the curve in that industry. And my partner in the deal, he knew the space. I went into it assuming that he was correct in his judgment about the market potential. Turns out he wasn't right, and we were way early. So you could either be early with an idea or you could be late with an idea. How do you know that the timing is right? What are your assumptions? What are the indications? Like, I would hate to be trying to open a new restaurant right in the middle of COVID-19. You know, that would be horrible timing. The call I got last night with a guy looking for help on a new venture, I'm not sure exactly what he wants to do, but he wants to start some sort of a recruiting search firm. My gut feel tells me this is a lousy time to do that. You know, people there's all kinds of candidates out there that companies can choose from. So I'm not sure they're going to support a new search firm. And for the millions of people who have lost their job, I'm not sure they're going to be willing to pay to use the search firm when there's so many social media platforms available to try to look and find jobs on. So how do you know the timing is right? What could go right or wrong? Maybe the timing is okay now, but what could go wrong to change the timing? What happens if we have another 9/11? And could your venture survive the next COVID-19? You know, and we're going to get another COVID-19. It might be in another form. It could be in the form of another 9/11 or another COVID-19 or something we've never heard of before. But we're certainly going to get national and global crises in the future that new businesses and all businesses are going to have to weather and survive through. And then finally, the last of the 8 factors that I think you should be thinking about in order to understand your positioning in the entrepreneurial world is, how are you going to transition a new business that you're starting and growing? Do you have a successor in place? Or are you even thinking about a successor? When I took over Killing Extruders, one of the first things I did, because I didn't intend to be in that business forever, was to think about who was going to be my successor in running the company. And I tried to find the experienced people by running ads. I couldn't find any experienced people. So I went out and I hired a college senior, and I kept him with me for 14 years. And he evolved into the number 2 person in the company. So you got to be thinking about succession early. What's your exit strategy, or don't you have one? Do you think you'll sell the business, or maybe you'll just shut it down when you wear out? Or maybe you have somebody in your family that you're going to leave it to? Our son has seen me go through 9 startups, and he hasn't really expressed any interest in succeeding me in any of them. And he's got a really great job in New York City now, doing turnaround, restructuring, consulting work, makes more money than I probably will ever make. And I'm not sure he's ever going to want to come into my business. So part of the reason I'm putting together advisors for Street Smart is so that there's a team in place. Some of them or all of them may want to succeed me in running the venture. And are you planning now for your transition, or are you going to wait, until years down the road when it may be too late to really successfully plan for a transition? And I have a recent friend I met in Texas, who's got a business coaching owners of privately held companies on how to maximize the value when they sell their business. And he likes to work with his clients 4 or 5 years before an anticipated transaction date. So they spend the last 4 or 5 years maximizing the value of the business by making whatever changes are required in the business model or the operations of the business itself. So, that's the 8th thing that you should be thinking about, but it's not a trivial thing to worry about.
Jack?
Yeah.
Since we're on the topic of family business, we have a question from Bruce asking if there's any statistical data that shows greater success or failure with family partnerships versus non-family alliances. Now, if I could take a crack at that question, I'd say, I was looking at researching data, and I think more than 70% of family-owned businesses don't make it to the 2nd generation. And I don't have any data comparing it to non-family alliances, but I know that some of the biggest problems that we encountered or that family businesses came to us with is, succession planning. And they need a lot of help with finding the right successor. Also, family members that are in the business don't have adequate financial education or management education. There's a lot of conflict. So, Jack, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think it's very tough. Like, with the company I took over, Killian Extruders, I took over, I was the second generation. I happened to be fortunate in turning it around, growing it and selling it, but I didn't have anybody, in my family that was positioned to take it into the third generation. So if 70% of them don't make it to the second, a much smaller percentage is going to make it to the third or subsequent generation. But I think through Street Smart Entrepreneurs, we're certainly going to want to be working with family-owned businesses and developing specific programs and courses for that audience. That's part of who we should be targeting. That was a great question, Bruce. Thank you for asking. Okay.
Yes.
So, a few people asked me why we're doing this free webinar, and here comes the pitch. Here's why we invested the time and the energy to do this today. We're a new venture. This is our kickoff activity, and I've described how our commitment is to providing various people in the entrepreneurial space with strategic business development guidance. That's going to take the form of consulting in a lot of cases in a variety of ways. It's going to take the form of providing critical information via a portfolio of courses and events and mentoring discussion groups. We're going to be forming the Street Smart Entrepreneurial Forum, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And that'll provide a platform for all of us to share ideas and questions. And we're going to be using our platform to share the key resources, global resources that we have. Like I said, I've been developing my network of key contacts for the last 45 years. I've got a really robust global network, and I'm perfectly happy to share some of my resources with the right people for the right reasons, because I think it's all about adding value to each other and all about giving back. So, our pitch was to get you interested in what we're doing and finding ways and synergies between us. So hopefully we can pursue opportunities and synergies together that result in a win-win situation. We're not necessarily trying to sell anything right now. We're just trying to raise awareness, raise interest, get you thinking about your own future, and get you thinking about how we might all work together. How can you help us, and how can we help you? So coming from Street Smart Entrepreneurs, in the short term, we plan, and we're already working on finalizing and releasing 3 how-to online courses. How to raise funding for your startup or early stage new business. I mentioned I had done this course 2 years ago, and it's on Udemy. It needs updating and certainly needs improving. But the course that I did 2 years ago has gotten 5-star ratings on Udemy from the people who bought it. So I think that's a key topic. We're going to we've virtually finished the course on how to network and create relationships to drive business growth. I think that's one of the single most important factors in developing an early stage company. And then the third thing that we're working on right now is how to develop a high ROI creative marketing action plan that you can put to work to build your business. And I think, the way that most small businesses need to grow is by being very creative in a marketing space. And I happen to know a lot of people who have those skills. And in all the courses that we develop, we're going to use ourselves, but other outside experts to chip in with instructions on how they do certain things. For example, in the marketing action plan, I want to have a section, or we want to have a section on branding your company. And I happen to know a couple of really exceptional organizations that are great at helping other small businesses brand themselves. So, look for our courses to include other outside content contributors. And then later this year, we're going to have a portfolio of other how-to online courses, maybe 8 or 10 of them by the end of the year. And we want to be organizing events by entrepreneurs like us and our advisors and our alliances for other entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. And one of the first major events that we're working on will probably happen in the first quarter of 2021. And the working title is Annual Business Development Summit for Small and Mid-Sized Companies. And I think that could be a 1 or 2 day program, probably virtual, all online, where we bring in experts from around the world to share their thinking on really how do you drive new business development in these small and mid-sized companies. And, you know, that's just a rich topic for instruction and discussion. So wrap up. I think there's lots to consider on all of our parts before and after we launch a new business. So we encourage you to think about all this stuff we talked about. And coming up with the right answers will certainly boost your chance of success, but it's not going to guarantee your success. And we're going to be circulating an evaluation form right after today's discussion. Timur is going to be sending it out. And we're going to be asking for some feedback both on this 1 hour course, but also on some of the things that we're planning to develop in the future. So your feedback is going to be really important to making future programs better and more relevant. So I thank you in advance for that. And as somebody who sat through today's session, you're going to be eligible for a free membership in our Entrepreneurs Forum that we're creating. And initially, our idea is that on the last Friday of every month, we will all come together in an open community for sharing ideas and questions and challenges and thinking. And we welcome you to be involved in that. And then we hope that you will reach out after today with any comments or questions, or with any issue that you think we might be able to help either issues that we've raised or that we haven't raised. So at the end of today, we're going to send everybody who participate copies of these slides. Timur has been recording the session, but you're going to get copies of the slides. So here's our contact information. And now let's switch to an open discussion. And I certainly appreciate everybody participation in sitting through this. And I think it's really valuable that you, and important to us that you invested your time to do this. So Timur, wow, look at all these handsome people. So Timur, why don't you, I'm impressed. If I had seen all you before, I would have been petrified. And I think it's, you know, both a lot of men and a lot of women on here. We got people from other countries on here. We got people in all stages of entrepreneurship on here. So I'm over being nervous. I turn it over to the rest of the group. Timur, fire away. Unmute everybody.
Yes, yes, great, Jack. Just first question from Chris Taylor. Do you have any tips in pitching ideas to venture capitalists? Does crowdfunding work?
Anybody want to take a shot at that?
We're all unmuted.
Stephen, is that you? Can't really hear Steve, right? Does it, Jasmine, do you have something to say? Has anybody had any GoFundMe experiences? Because I haven't.
Hi, Jack. It's Barry. How are you?
Hi, Barry. How are you?
Good. I mean, GoFundMe. We just did something, but it was not for business per se. It was just through the nonprofit. and raising funds for PPE on the front line. And I'm looking to relaunch the nonprofit for a totally different reason. And the GoFundMe was a great way to raise funds. I know that people have used it for business, and I can say that at least a lot of the young people today that I'm involved with care about causes of companies, and that more, I think, of business is going to be cause driven. And I think there are a lot of people that are willing to just fund a startup, not to get anything, because they want to watch it and they want to experience it and they want to see it grow. And they're willing to put little amounts if there's a real mission. I think somebody asked earlier, do you think about making a difference or just the money? And I really believe that if Timur, like what you said is, if you really love what you're doing, and you have a great story to tell and it resonates with people and their heart and their soul, I think GoFundMe could be a great vehicle to raise capital. At
How
least
much,
a small seed.
how much did you try to raise, Barry, in your last venture?
This was just a quick on the PPE, just trying to raise money for masks, and we ended up raising about $25,000 in, I don't know, a few days.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we gave out masks to the police officers, to the guys at the corrections officers at Rikers. Again, obviously it's a different thing, but in a difficult time, we were able to raise the funds. So
That's great.
yeah, I think it translates to business if you have a great story.
Yeah, I think anybody else want to comment on any of this? Barry's a good friend, and Barry heads her own law firm in the city, and she does particularly great work working with businesses in China and with Chinese-oriented businesses in both countries. So she's sort of a legal bridge between the two countries and been a friend for a long time. I'd like to particularly welcome Chris Taylor here. Chris is a good friend. Chris has one of the more interesting jobs of any of us on this call. He works in Pakistan, in Karachi, in a high-level leadership role in a relatively new university called the Habib University in Pakistan. And Chris is, I've known Chris 5 or 6 years. He used to be a dean of academic affairs at Drew University in New Jersey. Then he moved to Pakistan, and Chris has been very helpful in spreading the word about street smart entrepreneurs in Pakistan. And as a result, we have several participants today from that country, which I think is great. So Chris, thank you.
Jack, let's take another question.
Yeah.
Question from Amal. Do you have any tips on how to brainstorm and select the right business idea to start off?
Anybody want to talk about that? I think it's always great surrounding yourself with bright people. I don't think you should ever be egotistical and think that you have all the answers. So one of the reasons I'm putting together an advisory board for street smart entrepreneurs is because I'm sure I don't have all the answers on how to really turn this into a major successful business venture. So I want to have access to people who are smarter than me, that I can tap into their abilities to think through things. So I think you need to be great at asking questions. I have a friend in Texas, Bob Tiede, Tiede. I recommend you all look him up and find his website. Bob is an expert on asking questions, and he's written a couple of books that he makes available to people. And I think, before you jump off the edge with a new business idea, you better spend a lot of time asking people and getting feedback and getting reaction on your idea. And don't assume that you're right. I've seen too many people fail because they didn't really get feedback on their new ideas. Great question.
Jack, we have another question also from Chris Taylor. If you have a great idea, how do you protect it from being stolen by people you're pitching to?
Elizabeth, do you want to talk? Because you've got some background with IP law firm, and then I'll chip in.
Sure. So there are a few different ways that you can do that. The strongest is by having a patent application filed, but that's expensive. And you pretty much have to know what you're doing before you spend that money so you don't patent the wrong thing. There is a non-disclosure agreement, but most investors kind of get annoyed or insulted when you present them with a non-disclosure agreement. What we do at Gearhart Law, my husband owns a law firm, intellectual property law firm. If you have a good idea and you really do want to present it and you don't have the money and it's a germ of an idea, we'll do what's called a pre-provisional patent for $500, which is just getting something filed with the patent office so that you can protect your idea before you present it. And if you do think that you are going to want to sell your product overseas outside of the United States, then you have to have something on file if you're going to patent it at all, ever. Overseas, you have to have something on file before you disclose it to anybody. Otherwise, you lose your rights in Europe. So it's my 2 cents.
In terms of having been there, done that, I've got one story to share about having intellectual property ripped off. When we had Country Music Magazine, we had a really great logo for the magazine. It was a real country music with a TM trademark on the bottom right-hand side of it. And I was down in Nashville one day and I was walking through Sears Roebuck and I walked through the men's department. I walked past a belt rack and I look on the belt rack and there's big wide leather belts with a big brass buckle with our logo right in the middle of the brass buckle, including the TM indication. So I came back to New York City. I went to see our lawyer because I thought we hit $1 million home run that we were going to get Sears Roebuck to pay us a lot of money, right? And I talked to Steve Gross and we called the corporate counsel for Sears Roebuck, got him on the phone. I went through my little story. And at the end of listening to my little story, all he said to me was, sue us. And I said, that's your reaction? Just sue you? And he said, yeah, sue us. If you think we've infringed on your trademark, sue us. So I told Steve, put me on hold. Steve put us on hold. And I said to Steve, what's involved if we sue Sears Roebuck? He said, you're going to spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you may or may not win. And who knows what you'll get if you do win. I said, put the guy back on the phone. So he put the corporate counsel back on the phone. I said, I think you guys are bums. I said, you know that our little company can't afford to sue Sears Roebuck. I said, so we're stuck that you're going to be using our logo. I said, but for the next 45 years, and it's been about that long, I'm going to tell people about what a lousy culture Sears Roebuck has. And, you know, that's turned out to be the case. Sears Roebuck is disappearing, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to try to protect your idea, one of the things I tell entrepreneurs is you better have deep pockets in case you really have to defend your patent position. It's not just enough to get it, but you got to have the ability to aggressively protect it. And I think there are people in this call who have the expertise on how to deal with that issue of how do you protect your intellectual property when you don't have the money to aggressively going after an offender. So I think that's a great question.
There's one little trick on trademarks that I'm not sure that everybody knows about, but there's a form you can fill out when you file your trademark or have your attorney file it with the Customs and Border Patrol. And you can use that in Customs and Border Patrol to turn things away at the border if they come from other countries and are infringing your trademark.
I've never heard of that, so that's new information. And I think that's important for people to be alerted to. We have a lot of people on the phone. Anybody else? How about anybody from Pakistan? Anybody want to chip in?
10 p.m. here, Jack. Everybody's tired.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't want to drag this out. You will get copies of our slides, so you'll have access to us. Timor will have a list of the participants, so we can certainly put you in touch with each other. And we will be keeping you up to date going forward. Timor, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, just wanted to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We'll be sending out a survey following this. And see, just one last question popped up, maybe for both of us, Jack. Can entrepreneurship be taught and refined, or is it more of a genetic attribute? So I think
Or what?
genetic.
Can it be taught?
Can it be taught and refined? Or is it more of a genetic attitude? Oh, I don't know if we lost you, Jack. But yes, Jack's screen may have frozen. Yes, their entrepreneurship programs are popping up at a lot of schools, not just business schools, but engineering schools. It can be taught, it can be refined. It does change based on economy and leaders' behavior and kind of outside forces. I think entrepreneurship is also being grouped in with economic development. So I think having a strong foundation in economics, having foundation, as I mentioned before, understanding of data analytics, having analytical skills, as well as very good research skills. How do you research your market before you enter it is important, and something that we really define and teach in entrepreneurship, especially at the college and graduate level. I think it does change. I think it changes from place to place. There are a number of different governments and the way they practice investing in entrepreneurship. It differs around the world. So I think, yes, I think that was a great question. I don't know, Jack, are you still there? Did you want to give your 2 cents? I don't know if we lost him. But anyway, I just want to thank everyone for coming, and we will be sending out that survey soon. Keep in touch. We will have a number of new courses and events coming up. So thank you, and stay safe and healthy. Have a great weekend.